The Astonishing Rise. The Untold Story of Elon Musk. Prologue. The Boy Who Dreamed in Galaxies. In a quiet corner of Pretoria, South Africa, long before rockets thundered into orbit bearing the mark of SpaceX, before electric cars reshaped American highways, and before silicon and code threaded their way through the fabric of global commerce, there lived a boy named Elon. He wasn't particularly tall, nor particularly strong, and not even particularly popular. But inside his mind existed whole universes. Every night he devoured books the way others inhaled air. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Foundation, The Lord of the Rings, encyclopedias, engineering manuals, anything that suggested the world was bigger than what he could touch. And Elon, even at 12, was certain of one thing. He would play a role in shaping the future of humanity. But destiny, as it often does, did not arrive gently. Chapter 1. A Spark in Pretoria. Chapter 1. A Spark in Pretoria. Continued. Elon's childhood was a strange balance between isolation and exploration. While other boys played rugby in dusty schoolyards, Elon spent afternoons hunched over a Commodore VIC-20 keyboard that clicked like a mechanical heartbeat. At 12 years old, he built his first piece of software, a simple space-themed game called Blastar. To his surprise, a South African tech magazine paid him $500 for it. It wasn't the money that struck him. It was the realization that creation itself had value. But school was far from a haven. Elon's quiet nature made him a target. Day after day, a group of older boys trailed him like shadows, mocking, shoving, breaking his belongings. One afternoon, they threw him down a concrete stairwell so violently he spent days in the hospital and weeks at home recovering. Yet, while his body struggled to heal, his imagination soared. He read more. He coded more. He dreamed bigger. He dreamed of America. Chapter 2. Escape Velocity. By the time Elon turned 17, he knew Africa could no longer hold the future he imagined. He yearned for the United States, the land where innovation wasn't just admired, but expected. But getting there wasn't simple. Military service loomed in South Africa, and Elon refused to participate in a system he believed was fundamentally unjust. In an act of quiet rebellion, he applied for a Canadian passport through his mother, who had been born in Saskatchewan. When the papers arrived, he felt something shift inside him, like a rocket booster igniting. He packed a duffel bag, borrowed money from relatives, and boarded a plane to Montreal with no job, no home, and no guarantee of survival. What he carried instead was conviction. In Canada, he worked odd jobs, shoveling grain in a lumber mill, scrubbing boiler rooms so hot that the air shimmered, and cutting logs until his hands blistered. Each night, exhausted, he'd return to whatever couch or floor he was staying on and study textbooks on physics, engineering, and entrepreneurship. He wasn't just trying to survive, he was preparing. And soon, one of those steps would become a leap. Chapter 3. The American Dream Rewired. Elon's journey eventually led him to Queen's University, and then, more importantly, to the United States. When he transferred to the University of Pennsylvania, stepping onto American soil felt like stepping into destiny. At Penn, he double majored in physics and economics, not because he sought prestige, but because he saw them as the two pillars of humanity's future, understanding the universe and understanding how people would build within it. While classmates focused on parties or internships, Elon spent nights sketching out theoretical businesses, ideas that could push humanity forward. One notebook held early concepts for online banking. Another outlined reusable rockets. Another imagined solar-powered cities. People laughed when they saw the rockets. "That's NASA stuff," they'd say. But Elon didn't want NASA's job. He wanted to build the future NASA had forgotten. And soon, he would try. Chapter 3: The American Dream Rewired. Continued. Penn became a forge, a place where Elon's identity, ambition, and purpose were hammered into shape by relentless work and a vision that seemed too large to fit inside a classroom. While classmates were mapping out corporate career ladders, Elon calculated planetary escape velocities in the margins of his economics notes. He wasn't preparing for a job, he was preparing for a mission. He spent weekends in the university library until the lights dimmed, diving into astrophysics, propulsion systems, and the early architecture of the Internet. To Elon, the Internet was a living organism, new, volatile, and capable of rewriting the rules of civilization. Most people saw an interesting communication tool. He saw the beginning of a planetary nervous system. Still, the path wasn't smooth. Money was always scarce. Elon and his brother Kimball survived on dollar store hot dogs and discounted spaghetti. Elon rented a single room in a dilapidated fraternity house where the heat regularly failed. He often slept in his clothes during finals. But he didn't complain. Every hardship was a stepping stone. And soon, one of those steps would become a leap.
Chapter 3: The American Dream Rewired. Continued. Penn became a forge, a place where Elon's identity, ambition, and purpose were hammered into shape by relentless work and a vision that seemed too large to fit inside a classroom. While other students were mapping out corporate career ladders, Elon calculated planetary escape velocities in the margins of his economics notes. He wasn't preparing for a job. He was preparing for a mission. He spent weekends in the university library until the lights dimmed, diving into astrophysics, propulsion systems, and the early architecture of the Internet. To Elon, the Internet was a living organism, new, volatile, and capable of rewriting the rules of civilization. Most people saw an interesting communication tool. He saw the beginning of a planetary nervous system. Still, the path wasn't smooth. Money was always scarce. Elon and his brother Kimball survived on dollar store hot dogs and discounted spaghetti. Elon rented a single room in a dilapidated fraternity house where the heat regularly failed. He often slept in his clothes during winter finals. But he didn't complain. Every hardship was a stepping stone. And soon, one of those steps would become a leap. Chapter 4: Zip 2. The First Engine Ignites. In 1995, Silicon Valley was a chaotic frontier. Companies rose and fell faster than anyone could track, and every garage felt like a potential birthplace of the next big thing. Elon and Kimball arrived with $15,000 borrowed from their father, a second-hand car with a faulty heater, and a belief that the digital revolution would reshape cities. Their idea was simple, but ahead of its time. An online business directory connected to digital maps, something like a primitive version of Google Maps mixed with Yelp. They called it Zip 2. The brothers rented a tiny office and slept on a futon in the corner. They showered at a local YMCA. Elon coded through the night, often collapsing for an hour or two before waking to pitch investors. Most investors dismissed them. "Nobody will use the Internet to find businesses," one said. Another laughed at the idea of digital maps. But Elon kept pushing. His persistence paid off when more Davido ventures offered funding. Almost overnight, the Musk brothers went from sleeping on floors to leading one of Silicon Valley's fastest-growing startups.
Soon, Zip2 was signing contracts with major newspapers, the New York Times, the Chicago Tribune, bringing local businesses online in a way no one had attempted before. Then, in 1999, Compaq bought Zip2 for over $300 million. Elon, only 27, earned $22 million from the sale. He could have retired. But building Zip2 was just ignition. Elon was preparing for launch. Chapter 5. X.com. Reinventing Money. Fresh from his first major success, Elon did what few entrepreneurs would dare. He put nearly all of his newfound wealth into a new company. He wasn't interested in yachts or mansions. He wanted to tackle another outdated system: banking. At the time, online banking barely existed. Sending money digitally was cumbersome, slow, and often impossible. Elon believed the world needed a financial system built for the internet age, fast, accessible, and global. So he founded X.com. Most of Silicon Valley thought he was crazy. "You're going to take on banks?" reporters teased. Elon didn't flinch. X.com was bold, experimental, and risky. The team worked long nights refining payment systems, preventing fraud, and designing a user experience so simple even non-tech users could embrace it. Customers flocked in. Soon, X.com merged with another startup, Confinity, makers of a small product called PayPal. The merged company grew explosively. So explosively that tensions rose. Elon pushed for aggressive scaling, server migrations, and new strategies that some executives saw as reckless. Eventually, during one of his trips abroad, the board voted to replace him as CEO. It was a painful betrayal. But when eBay bought PayPal for $1.5 billion in 2002, Elon became its largest individual shareholder and walked away with $180 million. He could have walked away from risk forever. Instead, he aimed higher, so high people wondered if he had lost his mind. Chapter 6. SpaceX. The Impossible Mission. Elon Musk had always believed humanity's future depended on becoming a multi-planetary species. But in 2002, when he announced his intention to build rockets, Silicon Valley whispered that he had finally crossed into madness. Space was for governments, not startups. NASA's budgets were shrinking. Private spaceflight barely existed. Aerospace was a labyrinth of regulations, old contractors, and multi-billion-dollar barriers. But Elon wasn't deterred. He read rocket engineering textbooks as if they were beach novels. He traveled to Russia, hoping to buy refurbished rockets, only to be mocked by officials who treated him like a naive outsider. On the flight home, he opened a spreadsheet and began calculating the cost of building rockets from scratch. Halfway through the equations, he looked up. "It's possible," he whispered. "Not easy, not cheap, but possible." That was enough. Chapter 7. The Falcon is Born. SpaceX began in a warehouse in El Segundo, California. The team consisted of young, brilliant engineers, many barely out of school, who were willing to work insane hours for a chance to change history. They shared a singular belief: if reusable rockets were possible, they would transform spaceflight forever. Elon wasn't just the CEO. He was in the trenches, sleeping on the factory floor, reviewing engine designs at 2 a.m., and challenging every assumption. Then came the Falcon 1. A simple rocket in theory, a nightmare in reality. In 2006, SpaceX launched its first rocket from an island in the Pacific. Spectators cheered as the engines ignited, but seconds later, the rocket spiraled out of control and exploded. The second launch failed too, and then the third. By the time 2008 arrived, SpaceX was nearly bankrupt. Elon had poured in almost all of his PayPal fortune. Engineers whispered about shutting down. Friends told him to quit.